What is up, guys, and welcome back to Flow State. It is episode 45, I believe, today. And once again, it is a bit of a solo episode. As you can see, I'm not joined by my illustrious co-host, Adam. And once again, that's on me. That's my bad. Life as a parent is obviously challenging at the best of times, and it has meant that recording at our usual time, because obviously myself and Adam are either sides of the planet, it does make things quite difficult. We have a very small window typically to record. So this week and potentially for coming weeks, it might be a little bit off schedule. It might just mean there's a few extra solo episodes coming your way. We might even try and get some more guests on just to shake things up a little bit. But for the time being, it's just going to be me today. And I thought I would go through some questions that we've had of late, questions that I've kind of put out to clients, to friends who I know are interested in the realm of endurance sports. Definitely there will be some running. I know I haven't been doing heaps of running lately, but there will be some running related questions. A bit of cycling stuff as well, and then some endurance, I guess general endurance things. So hopefully there's a little bit of something for everyone, and they'll go through, or I will go through some topics that are interesting to you guys. So yeah, I'm just going to dive straight into the first question I've got here today. And that is Zone 2 training overrated? And man, it's one of those questions just straight out the gate that's like, well, it depends on so many different things. I think realistically, well, if we even cover what Zone 2 is, so we're obviously talking about kind of training at Zone 2 heart rate. So typically that is the training zone that it's not quite a walk. Like if we're talking about Zone 1, that would be literally just walking down the road, heart rate real low, like could do that literally forever. Zone 2 is where you get into that training where it's, let's say you're cycling, you're running, and you're going at that comfortable pace, heart rate staying pretty steady. You can feel that there is, like, you're obviously working, but it's sustainable and you can hold a conversation. I think that's typically the best way to put it, is it's conversational based training, and you can probably do it for, like, as long as you're fueled. Like Zone 2, you could probably maintain for hours and hours and hours and hours without kind of finding that you bunk, really. So is that overrated? And the easy answer is no, because you can, like, when we're talking about endurance training and getting better at what we do as runners and cyclists, like being able to have more efficient mitochondria, basically like the powerhouse of the cell, if you will, the best way for these adaptations to come is by spending more time in that zone. And as a result, the mitochondria get more efficient at taking substrates, at taking energy that you're putting in the form of food, like whether it's carbohydrates, whether it's fat, stored fat, and transferring it to energy. Like Zone 2 is the GOAT for that. So in short, like, no, it's not overrated. But where I think the idea of it becoming overrated are that obviously the elites are spending, that's where the 80-20 rule comes from, right? And for those that haven't heard, a lot of elites live by the idea that you should spend 80% of your training time in Zone 2 and the other 20 is for more high intensity stuff. And the reason being is that Zone 2, you can do heaps of it without accumulating too much fatigue. So when you're thinking about, okay, you've got professional runners doing 100 to 200K a week, you've got professional cyclists riding for 15 hours, there's only so much high intensity stuff you can do. So Zone 2 has to be the bread and butter, because that's the only training you can do. That's the only amount that you can accumulate for the necessary amounts of volume without adding fatigue. So for those guys, it becomes pivotal. However, let's say you're only doing 2 runs a week, right? You're not going to spend 80% of that time necessarily in Zone 2, because you need more high intensity stuff if you want to move the dial. So I think it really comes down to the individual. Like the 80-20 rule basically becomes a little bit kind of obsolete, maybe isn't the right word, but unnecessary, shall we say, if you're not doing super high volumes of training. You probably can afford to spend more of that time in higher heart rate zones, because you need to get that quality training. And then again, it comes down to the fact that if you're a beginner, most of your training, like you're not going to spend long in zone 2 anyway, because the amount of space between zone 1 and zone 5 probably is quite small. So you're going to go through the zones very quickly, and it's going to be hard to pinpoint that zone 2. So that is a very long-winded way of me saying, is zone 2 overrated? No, it's not, but there's obviously it's obviously context dependent. Next question. So is it better to train by heart rate or pace/power? And in short, I don't think it's necessarily better to train with either one. I'd say if it was up to me, and what do? I train to both, right? So when every single training session I do, I have my heart rate monitor on, because I like to know heart rate. And I know Adam's a big proponent of obviously going by feeling, but for me, like I really like having maybe it's because I'm a bit newer to the style of training, but I love having that heart rate data because it gives me so much insight, right? So I think heart rate is probably a good way to see, to know if you are sitting in those heart rate zones, right? Because otherwise you just don't know. You can go by feel. But let's go by today, for instance. I did like a really easy 90 minutes on the trainer. It was meant to be a zone 2 ride. And I felt like I was working quite hard, but then my heart rate was a lot lower than it would have been for a zone 2 run, for instance. Like running, I know for a fact my zone 2 is kind of stops at around 130 to 132 BPM. And that's the end of my zone 2. That's the high end. And I don't really want to go much higher than that. And it can go as low as maybe like 105, right? That's probably where my zone 2 sits. But then I felt like subjectively I was pushing quite hard on this ride. I should have been like, oh, if you would have asked me what do you think my heart rate is and I didn't have it in front of me, I'd have said, oh, maybe 120, 125 tops, whereas actually it was sitting at about 110. So it's probably just a case of I needed to warm up a little bit more. So I like having both to correlate with. And this, again, that can give me indication of what kind of status I'm in, right? So if I'm noticing that subjective effort is quite high, but my heart rate is actually quite low, I don't feel 100%. That might be a sign that, as I've spoken about with Adam over the last couple of weeks, that my nervous system is maybe a little bit suppressed and I'm probably due for maybe a rest day or kind of that lighter session, which I just happen to be doing anyway, as opposed to a workout, right? So I really like going by both and then kind of correlating and learning where my heart rate should sit for a given pace or power. And again, I've actually been journaling a lot more in my training recently because I've found it really good to look back on certain sessions, whether you're doing, let's say you're doing intervals, you're doing a tempo run, even a long run, you can look back and go, well, okay, I noticed that for the same distance last week, my heart rate was a lot higher. This week was a lot lower. Okay, well, what does that tell me? Well, how was I feeling? Was I feeling better when my heart rate was a bit higher? Maybe that's where it should have been on the day, like myself today, where it was slightly lower. That probably wasn't a good thing. So again, it comes down to knowing that obviously lower heart rate isn't always a better thing. Can be, but not always. So I would say if you can, invest in a good heart rate monitor chest strap. Like it may ignore this, the watch, the heart rate you get off that is average at best. It can also pick up your cadence if you're bouncing along your heart rate. Your watch can pick up that and get confused. So always go for a chest strap. I'm currently using the Polar, I think it's called HR something or H10. Because I've had issues with the Garmin, but again, it's whatever works for you. They're all around a similar price. So just kind of do your research, get yourself a good heart rate chest strap, and then again, correlate that to certain paces and powers. And the more you do, the more training you do, you'll be able to kind of see trends and patterns. So that is my answer to that. Next one. So I'm rattling through these. I'm going to try and get as many questions in for you as I can because I want to make this work in the time I have available. Can you still make meaningful endurance gains training only kind of 3 to 4 days per week? And the answer is yes, absolutely. Absolutely you can. And I'd say I'm a testament to this because when I ran my first race, my first half marathon back in 2024, I think it was 2024, a couple of years ago now. I think I was literally running 3 times a week. So I was doing I was doing one kind of steady run with a couple of sprint efforts. I was doing one easy run, one steady run with some sprint efforts, and then I was doing quite an intense. It ended up being an LT2 session. It should have been an LT1 session. I was just pushing it too hard, and it was just 3 runs a week. I think my weekly volume must have been about, I want to say 40k maybe, and I ended up kind of getting a sub 90-minute half marathon. So absolutely, you can still make meaningful gains on 3 to 4 days a week. I would just implore you to heed my warning and don't make the same mistakes I did, in that I did push way too hard too often. So my easy run became more of a tempo run because that's what I thought you had to do. I still obviously did very well because I was a beginner. And that's, again, what I'd say is that training 3 to 4 days a week will get you so far as a beginner, maybe an early intermediate. But as you then become more advanced, you need more volume to get better. And the issue with only being able to run 3-4 days a week is you have to cram that volume into less time. And that ends up being, when you're trying to get, like if I was trying to get at my peak, I was doing 80 to 90k a week. If I was trying to split that into 3 or 4 days, it's going to get problematic because those are really big runs you're doing. And it's not always, but it's probably going to be a better idea to try and spread that over as many days as you can. So what I'd say is, yes, go ahead. If that's all the time you've got, just do what you can on those days. Just being strategic with kind of how you're applying that volume. So maybe you'd want like longer, easy runs. And I'm sure Adam would probably agree with me on this. You'd maybe do 2 longer, easy runs, keeping it real steady. And then on those other 2 days, maybe doing a bit of a LT1 interval session, and then having the 4th day as an optional, either a kind of a steady long run, or potentially you can move that to a short and easy run. And again, you don't have to do the same weeks, week in and week out. You can just alternate. So you might want to do like a progressive run in 1 week and an LT1 session the next week, and play around with it. And if you're ever unsure, like, Adam's a coach, I'm a coach, we're here to help. So yeah, that's probably what I'd say with that. So the long and short of it is, yes, 3 to 4 runs a week is fine, or training days, shall we say, but there's definitely a cap on how much you'll be able to do with that. Okay, next question. Should anyone be focusing on cadence, or is that something that naturally self-optimizes? That's a good question. And I would honestly say I've done a little bit of kind of reading on cadence, and top of my head, for the life of me, I've forgotten what it is. There's a really good book, and again, this is awful podcasting because I've forgotten the name of that book. But there is an optimal cadence for running, but there's probably a lot more things you should be focusing on before you do start running on that cadence, because again, it's going to be hard to measure, like, unless you're wearing, I know, some heart rate chest straps will pick up on cadence, like the Garmin definitely does. But if you're otherwise trying to measure it, like, I think you can get maybe something you attach to your shoe that will do it, but it's quite hard to pick up. So what I'd say is it's probably better to worry about other things first. Like, if for most of us, you're going to be better off focusing on like what the actual runs are themselves, as opposed to cadence. And again, just cutting to the chase, why would you need to run at high cadence, or why does cadence even matter? Well, cadence probably dictates how much time you're spending in contact with the ground. And ideally there is going to be an optimal point, because you don't want to spend too long in contact with the ground, because you're losing energy. Like, you are losing energy. So we want to be nice and springy, and that means kind of minimal contact time and like really turning the legs over quite quickly, as well as obviously having that kind of upward oscillation. So making sure you're getting into the air nicely. That's going to help with just running efficiency, and making sure you're not burning too much energy or using a lot of that spring you have in your soft tissues. So in short, and this is something I tell a lot of my clients, is we're not trying to muscle through runs. We're trying to bounce. We're trying to spring, and that's less muscle work, more soft tissues. So yeah, what I'd say is probably don't worry about it. Just try and focus on the big rocks first. And then if you're someone that is kind of quite advanced and is looking to has done like multiple marathons and you're really trying to optimize, get those 1%ers, yeah, maybe have a look at kind of Cadence and start to see if you can hit that ideal number. Obviously research it first, but it will probably mean for most people just quicker leg turnover, making sure you're really kind of driving your knees up and then pressing into the ground quite hard to get that upward oscillation as well. So maybe I'm not the best person to ask for this because I'm not like an ultimate expert, but that would be my thoughts on that. Similar kind of question here. This leads into it nicely. Is heel striking a problem, or is it just a misunderstood topic? And I'd say a bit of both. Like where my thoughts go is that most of us as Western runners who spend our lives in heavily cushioned shoes and sitting down and with bad kind of biomechanics or like altered biomechanics from our lifestyle, is that heel striking probably is a bit of a problem. It's probably not helping us, and naturally I don't think we're meant to run as heel strikers. And this becomes evident when you look into like a lot of the Kenyan and Ethiopian runners, like the best runners in the world, is they're not really heel striking. They're landing kind of mid or forefoot, and that's where the spring comes from. Because if you kind of crash and crunch into the ground with your heel, like you're not getting much bounce, you're not getting much stretch shortening of the soft tissues in the back of the leg, and so it's probably not ideal, and then you end up like me, pretty badly injured with heel issues. So like I'm a bit biased. I'd say yes, I think heel striking is a bit of a problem. But again, with like with Cadence, I think over time, as you become a more confident runner and hopefully like doing more runs, wearing different pairs of shoes, it should self-optimize as well. You should find that you're kind of naturally more inclined to press through the midfoot. But again, this is where it comes down to choosing the right pair of shoes as well, because I'd say people automatically, or more often than not, automatically assume that a cushioned pair of shoes is going to be best because it's most comfortable. It's like, well, no, because that's probably actually steering you towards bad habits that are already in place, right? So I mean, if I'm to use a bit of an extreme analogy, if I was to get someone to run barefoot, you're going to be really soft on your forefoot. You're not gonna heel strike at all, because that's probably, you're trying to protect it, right? And that's how a lot of these East African runners learn to run, is because they run barefoot, they run in minimal plating. Whereas then I'd say minimal cushioning, I should say. Whereas if I then were to give someone a pair of kind of minimalist shoes, a pair of cushioned shoes, you're then more inclined to just revert to old habits. So I think it's probably more natural for us to be inclined to run with less heel striking. So that's probably the direction I would take that in. That's a really confusing way. I've kind of answered this quite badly. That's on me, guys. Hopefully it all makes sense. But what I'd say is like, yes, I think heel striking is a bit of an issue. And if you can, get yourself to a good running shop that does actually kind of scan or video how you run, in order to get a pair of shoes that is fitted to you and is going to accommodate you and try and get you into better habits and a better gait ultimately. Because again, over time, heel striking, if it's repetitive, it can lead to issues. You can get stress fractures. You can end up like me with either kind of nerve issues or wearing away the fat in your heels. So I'd definitely look into that if you're worried you're a heel striker. But if you're like a brand new runner, you could probably just like hold off for a little bit, just get used to running, and then over time see how it progresses. Maybe even get someone to record you from the side on a treadmill, and then in a couple of months' time, like record again and see how your foot strikes and if there's been any difference to that. Um, Lots of economical questions. I think that's a good adjective to use. But the next one is, do carbon plated shoes actually make you faster or just more economical? And the answer is both. Like, I think as a result of wearing carbon plated shoes, let's rewind. Why would you wear carbon plated shoes? Well, they're often like very bouncy, so they use technology that helps you kind of propel yourself into the air a little bit more, and you also get more kind of spring from that carbon plate that sits under the foot. It's like a little trampoline that goes under your foot, and that's giving you kind of more upward propulsion. So is that making you more economical or faster? Well, I think primarily that is making you more economical. Like when they've done, from what I know, when they do testing in labs to see which shoe is better suited to which athlete, they go by running economy. So they keep you at the same pace and they go, okay, which one are you using least amount of energy for, right? So they literally like they put a mask on you, see how much oxygen you're expelling, and I think they work out what is the one that helps you use the least amount of energy. So that is running economy, right? But as a result of that, you're probably going to find you can go faster for the same relative effort levels. So let's say you're running at an 8 out of 10 in a pair of cushioned daily trainers. You might be running at a 5:10 per kilometer pace. Put you in a pair of Alpha Flies and they say go run 8 out of 10, you're probably finding that, oh, I'm getting a little bit higher now. It's propelling me forward. All of a sudden, I'm running at 450, and that's my 8 out of 10 effort levels. So it's kind of the speed is a byproduct of running economy. And again, that begs the question, why can't we just do all our runs in super shoes, in carbon plated shoes? It's like, well, they don't, carbon plated shoes come at a cost, or shall we call them super shoes, come at a cost. And that is they can exacerbate kind of running issues. So for me, for instance, I had really weak, or maybe not really weak, but weaker than I'd like them, tib post muscles on the inside of especially on the inside of my left calf. And I found that when I was wearing Alpha Flies, especially, I would overpronate, and that would result in issues. And that was becoming really apparent when I was wearing the super shoes, because they're more cushiony. And yeah, it's just you're not gonna be able to feel the ground. You're not gonna get that impact through the foot, which is really beneficial for things like bone mineral density and actually preventing injury. So that's why we say rotate shoes and try not to spend too long in any one pair, because you want the body to be able to adapt to lots of different pairs, and then only use those carbon plated shoes for kind of race specific runs, or those really intense runs where you're going to be more kind of race specific or running at faster tempos, and you need that extra push, if that makes sense. Okay, so I'm going to do one more running one, then I might get into some cycling and maybe even some lifestyle and nutrition stuff. So how much slower should easy runs be compared to race pace? Good question. And I think it's all relative, but I think pretty considerably slower. And again, it depends on what race. But let's say so for me, again, this is where using heart rate really comes into play, because you can not just rely on pace. You can go by heart rate and also relative effort, which I think is really important. But I ran my marathon at just under, I think it was just under 4-minute pace. Mate, it's been so long since I've done any running. I've bloody forgotten what pace I ran my marathon in. I think so. For me, my race pace was probably around the kind of the 4-minute per K mark, whereas my easy runs would be anywhere from, when I was at my peak, it was about 5 minutes to 5:20. So I'd say that's probably a safe place to go. At least for me, a minute per kilometer slower. But again, it comes down to relative effort and heart rate as well. Like, I think it's really important to go by feel. Like, those easy runs really should be bloody easy. Like, you shouldn't be feeling like your heart rate's climbing through the run, and you shouldn't be feeling like it's an unsustainable effort. You should feel like you should be able to have a chat to the guy next to you, and that you could comfortably go for hours if you're being fueled properly. And that's not to say like some easy runs shouldn't feel like your legs are a bit heavy or it's a bit of a slog because there's other factors at play. You might be recovering from a previous session. You might find that you're just psychologically a bit fatigued. But I'd say like realistically a minute plus slower is probably pretty reasonable compared to marathon pace. And then obviously it's going to get even the discrepancy is going to get even bigger for faster races. And like as I tell my clients, those easy runs shouldn't be getting quicker over time. They should be getting easier, if anything, for the same pace, right? Because at the end of the day, those easy runs are there to help you get time on feet without accumulating too much fatigue. And in addition, they're helping you to absorb training. You're not trying to add more stress. So don't be going, okay, like I want to be getting faster and faster with these easy runs. It's like, nah, keep them slow, man. Keep them slow. And that's something that I've like really, for me, has become apparent since I've been cycling, because I'm like, no, I can see my wattage is pretty similar and I'm not gaining anything by going any quicker. So again, I just like to use heart rate for that as well. But hopefully that answers that. And I'm going to have a brief pause to get some fluids down me because I've been chatting for 25 minutes already. Jesus Christ. Good stuff. All right. Let's do. I'm going to do some nutrition and fueling questions because people always love that kind of stuff. So how necessary are gels, or can real food work just as well? In short, real food can work absolutely just as well. And I think Adam is a big proponent of having those jelly snakes. I think it's jelly snake. No, he's Henry Hippo's kind of guy. But I know Adam will love to have like little sweets as he goes on runs, or if not, at least before runs. But the main difference between gels and sweets, convenience is a big one. Like gels, you don't have to chew anything. They're not always that sticky. Sometimes they are. But gels, you can just kind of, they're in a pocket. You rip the top and you drink it down, basically. Like there's nothing more convenient for that. But some other things to consider, like first off, is that gels have been optimized for training. So they're a good ratio of fructose to glucose, normally like 0.8 to 1 percentage like difference between like total carbohydrates, and that is what is optimal for running. So as well as getting the energy straight in, you're also getting the right amount stored in the stomach. B is that they are typically easier on the stomach as well, so they don't have other ingredients that might set you off. And yeah, no, those are the main ones really. So yeah, like when you're cycling, it becomes a little bit different because you're not bobbing up and down for hours on end. And like you can see pro cyclists, if they're on like Tour de France stages, sometimes they're eating stuff. They've got stuff in like cling wrap and they're putting it down. Whereas for runners, like it's always drinks or gels, and that's because of the convenience and how that you probably don't want to be chewing anything when you're running and you're trying to breathe at the same time. That's going to be pretty damn hard. So in short, like you're not reliant on gels, but it's probably a good idea for runners because yeah, stomach upset and just ease. So the ability to get food down. Another fueling question: should endurance athletes worry about protein timing like strength athletes do? I think yes. I think I wouldn't say worry is the right word, but I think be mindful of it, because strength athletes or people trying to build muscle, like what they suggest is kind of a 25 to 30 gram bolus of protein, like every 3 to 5 times a day is optimal for trying to build muscle, because it spikes muscle protein synthesis. For endurance athletes, you have to look at it more around, okay, I probably want to be getting 3 boluses of protein a day. because you do need to maintain lean tissue. You're not necessarily trying to grow, but you do need to be able to repair and rebuild. And that becomes specifically important, or especially important after like bigger training sessions, because when you're doing like an interval session or a long run or a long ride, you have broken down muscle tissue, and you do need to start repairing that. And that's where I'd go, okay, if you've just finished that long run or long ride, you probably had some carbs during that session, which is great and definitely something recommended. But then protein, you probably want to be getting it in within like ideally an hour of finishing, because the carbohydrates, yes, that's going to replenish muscle glycogen stores, but then you need the protein to rebuild as well. And then once you've done that, like you probably don't need to worry so much, as long as you're getting like a nice kind of 1.2 to 1.6 grams per kilo of body weight per day. That's probably going to be plenty. And then, like I said, spreading it over kind of 3 to 4 meals a day is fine. More is probably overkill. Less probably not going to matter if you can still get it in, but it just makes it hard to fit it into 2 meals, because that's a lot of protein ultimately. All right, I'm going to do a couple of recovery questions as well, just because I'm going to try and keep this one relatively short and sweet for you guys today. How do you know if fatigue is from training load or poor sleep or stress? The short answer is you don't, because fatigue or kind of stress is shared between things like life stress and training stress. It's all taken from the same pot. And ultimately, like if you're feeling like you're under recovered, like it could be training, it could be lifestyle, and the only way to really know is kind of to step back and go, okay, what's changed in this period of time since I'm feeling like I'm under recovered. Essentially, like have I spiked my training load or my training volume in the last few weeks? Am I going through any psychological stuff that might have impacted it? And kind of troubleshoot that way. But at the end of the day, it's very hard. Like if you've done both, let's say you're going through a hard time at work or at home, or you're not sleeping well because you've got a newborn like me, and you've also decided that you're going to do more training. Bit silly in the first place, to be honest with you, and I wouldn't necessarily recommend that. But then you got to go, okay, what's the trade-off? Something's got to give, because ultimately if you're throwing more training at yourself while you're under recovered, you're just going to end up injured or sick, and no one wants that. So I think ultimately that, like, the best way to know is by zooming out and looking at anything that might have changed. And then in order to address it, you'd have to just choose one thing and pull it back, right? Most of the time for us normal people, that's not going to be life. You can't suddenly stop working. You can't suddenly decide to start sleeping better, but you might have to reduce training volume or opt for more easy runs as opposed to the interval sessions, right? So that's probably the best advice I can give with that. And then, yeah, maybe also look at, okay, if you're sleeping bad, why are you sleeping bad? Or are you not eating enough? That kind of thing as well might help. Another one is taking a full rest day better than doing a recovery session. That's a really good question. That is a really good question. And I would say it depends on, like, if you know yourself and you've been training for a while, that's going to be a better kind of indicator of what you should do. Because like if you're really unwell, or you're like, the thought of doing any training is just unbearable, and it feels like, okay, it's not my day, I feel terrible, I've got no energy, I think that's probably best when to take a full rest day. It is what I'd say. Like, and again, the more you train, the more you'll know, like, today's not the day. Whereas if it's just let's say you've got an interval session or a threshold session planned, and you get to the morning or the evening of, and you're like, I just don't think I've got it in me, that's when it might be kind of worth looking at, okay, let's do a recovery session instead. Maybe I'll do kind of 30-40 minutes easy, as opposed to that kind of hour-long interval session. But then you've also got the option, like if you're ever unsure, just start training light, go out for that run, jump on the bike, do whatever you got to do. do a 10-minute warm up. And if you're seeing that your heart rate is not where it normally is, if you're feeling even worse, or you still don't have it in you, just hop off, right? So it can't hurt to try and just like start warming up. And in fact, like I follow, I'm sure we've spoken about him on the past, like Victor Smongs from Runners FM podcast. I follow him on Strava. I saw the other day that he posted like I think it was literally like a 1.3 kilometer warm up run. I was like, oh, that's a bit odd. And in the comments, he literally put, okay, I started warming up and it just wasn't there today, so decided to take a rest day. So exactly that. He went out, he started to warm up to see how we felt, and he went, nah, today's not the day. Instead of doing anything, I'm gonna recover. I'm going to rest, let myself absorb like whatever it is that is going on, absorb it, get over it. I'll come back and reattempt that session tomorrow. So, yeah, that's what I'd say. I'd say know yourself, like be honest. Like if it's a session where, it's quite an intense session, ask yourself the question of, okay, we'll try doing any kind of training here make me feel better or worse? And if worse comes to worse, just try an easy session, see how you get on in a warm up, and then pull back if you need to. That's a good question, though. I really like that one. All right, I might as well finish up with a couple of cycling questions because we're here and we've made it this far. So is indoor training like Zwift, what I'm doing, or on a trainer session as effective as riding outdoors? And if anything, I'd say it's probably more effective, right? Because if you're doing an outdoor ride, you have to bear in mind that I'd say maybe a third, if not a quarter of a session is going to be spent freewheeling, where you're basically not pedaling at all. You're just sitting there kind of going downhill or sitting behind someone. And that's not training. Like your heart rate's going to come down. That's not high training. Whereas if you're doing an indoor session, you're training constantly. So it's probably like an hour and a half on Zwift is probably the equivalent of doing 2 hours out on the road. So absolutely, it's as effective, if not more effective than outdoor. However, what it's not going to do is give you experience. It's like running on a treadmill versus running outdoor, right? If you're planning to do big rides or race, like the Zwift training is only going to take you so far because it's not going to get you like acclimated to riding on the road and dealing with headwinds, crosswinds, tailwinds, riding with other riders. So you got to bear those things in mind as well. So it's probably like ideally, I think what you should do is maybe a big mix of both, especially if you're time crunched and can't get out like the pros do for 2-3 hours at a time. It's probably better off to save when you've got the most time, do your sessions, do your long rides, and then when you don't, jump on the trainer and just try and get quality in, like whatever it is, 45 minutes an hour, just try and get continuous solid training in. So that, again, pretty good question. You know what I might do? I think I'll be going for about 40 minutes today. So I think I'll wrap up with one more question. Do cyclists need to run or cross train for better overall fitness? Long and short of it is no. For fitness, as long as you're doing enough total volume, like you're getting those fitness gains. And I think that's been pretty evident by the amount of time I've spent on the bike and the fact that I have been able to like transfer back to running relatively okay. Like the only difference really is muscular endurance and soft tissue endurance. But fitness wise, like the heart doesn't know whether you're running or cycling, is what I'd say. Right, the cardiovascular system, the respiratory system doesn't know what you're doing. All it knows is it's working, and that can be done by any means. Like that's why, like last Friday, for instance, I was able to do a session on the elliptical and get myself up to like, I was basically able to do an LT1 session. And the body doesn't know what's going on. The heart, all it knows is it's going up to that point of that lactate threshold, and I'm getting quality training in, whether it's on the bike, whether it's running, whether it's on the elliptical. So for fitness, no, you don't need to cross train, and that the same goes for running as well. But is cross training a worthwhile thing? Well, yes, for me, absolutely it is, because it's going to keep me doing a run is going to keep me out the saddle for one day, because again, that raises issues when you're sitting in a saddle for heaps of time. Gets pretty uncomfortable, saddle sores, that can be a problem. But also things like being able to make sure you have that impact through the foot, right? We know that running is really good for developing bone mineral density, and for cyclists, there's no impact. You lose that. So doing a run a week, like it's a mental break, and it's giving you that opportunity to get some of those forces through the legs, through the bones, and that can be really good for helping create stronger bones, which in the long run is really, really important. So and the same goes for running, right? Like it's the opposite effect. You might want to spend some time away from that impact, because at the end of the day, sometimes you do still want to develop fitness, but the legs do get a heck of a shock when you're running kind of 100 plus K a week. So doing an easy session on the bike instead might be worthwhile, just to take you away from some of that impact, and then you're still getting the fitness gains. You could even do like an interval session on a bike, as long as you're adapted to it, and you've warmed into the bike and you're comfortable with your position. You can get some really solid training on the bike there, and you're also working the musculature a little bit more. So you might even see a little bit of hypertrophy, muscle hypertrophy, which is never a bad thing, because as runners and cyclists, we do need a little bit of muscle, not too much, but enough to make sure that we're not completely catabolic and wasting away. So yeah, I'm really happy with that. Hopefully we've answered some questions that are applicable to you and you've found it somewhat interesting. But again, me and Adam always love topics to discuss outside of just Harry Styles, if you watched last episode or listened to it. So if you do have any interesting questions, send them through to us. You can just message us on Instagram on the Flow State Insta, or comment on any of our kind of YouTube or Spotify uploads. But otherwise, this has been episode 45. Like I said, it might be a little bit up and down over the next few weeks with kind of solo episodes and some different topics, so bear with us. Hopefully we will get to a place of normality somewhat soon, somewhat soonish. But yeah, in the meantime, keep liking, subscribing, following. It's been lovely talking to you guys, and I'm looking forward to checking in again soon. Thanks guys, and all the best.